Ladies and gentlemen, whatever you think you know about what happened on the grass courts of Bad Homburg this week, you are about to look at it completely differently, because buried inside a routine quarterfinal scoreline, a result most casual fans swiped past without a second thought, is one of the most quietly beautiful stories of the entire grass court season. And by the time we are done here, you are going to understand exactly why 80 minutes. That is all the time the world has. 80 minutes of a partnership that tennis fans had been dreaming about, a pairing that felt almost too good to be real, and then it was gone. Alexandra Eala, the 21-year-old rising star, and Venus Williams, one of the greatest champions the sport has ever produced, walked off the court together for the final time after a straight sets defeat. And just like that, the fairy tale closed its final page. But here is the thing I need you to understand right now before we go 1 inch further. This was never about the scoreline. The numbers on the board tell you almost nothing about what actually unfolded. So let's slow down, let's strip it back, and let's look at what really happened, because the story behind this loss is far bigger than the loss itself. The final score read 6-3, 6-2, 2 clean sets. On paper, it looks lopsided. On paper, it looks like a mismatch. But the match did not begin the way that scoreline suggests, and that is the first thing you need to know. Eala and Williams came out swinging. They came out confident. They built an early 3-2 lead in the opening set, holding serve, moving well, looking for all the world like a team that had been playing together for years instead of days. The crowd felt it. You could sense the buzz building, that electric feeling that something special might be brewing. And then, almost without warning, the whole thing flipped. Their opponents, Slovakia's Teresa Mihalikova and Great Britain's Olivia Nichols, the tournament's second-seeded doubles team, found another gear. They ripped off 6 consecutive games, 6. In a blink, the early lead vanished. The first set was gone, and Mihalikova and Nichols had surged to a 2-0 advantage in the second. One moment, Eala and Williams were leading the match. The next, they were chasing it with no way to catch up. Now, here is what I want you to sit with. The story here is not that Eala and Williams played badly. They didn't. The story is one of the oldest, hardest truths in all of tennis. In doubles, chemistry beats star power. Years of communication, years of instinct, years of knowing exactly where your partner is going to be before they even move there, that is worth more than any trophy cabinet. No matter how talented 2 individuals are, an established team can make the gap look far wider than the names on the court would ever suggest. And that is exactly why you have to look at who was standing on the other side of the net. Mihalikova and Nichols were not a last-minute pairing. They were not 2 singles players thrown together for a quick experiment. This was a real team, a polished team, a unit that had entered 9 consecutive tournaments together, building the kind of seamless understanding that only comes from months of grinding side by side. And just weeks before this, earlier in June, they had captured the doubles title at the prestigious Queen's Club Championships. They arrived in Bad Homburg as one of the hottest teams on grass in the entire sport. Across from them stood a partnership that had existed for barely more than a day. Let that contrast sink in for a second. On one side, a finely tuned machine. On the other, 2 extraordinary players who were still learning each other's rhythms in real time. And that level of instinctive trust simply cannot be manufactured overnight. Not even, and I mean this, not even when one half of your team is a 7-time Grand Slam singles champion. The statistics make the difference impossible to argue with. In the opening set, Eala and Williams fought hard and carved out 4 breakpoint opportunities, 4 chances to seize control. They converted just 1. Mihalikova and Nichols, on the other hand, manufactured only 3 breakpoint chances all set, and they buried every single one of them. 3 for 3. That is the entire match in a nutshell. When the door cracked open for Eala and Williams, they couldn't quite shoulder their way through. When the experienced duo saw an opening, they walked right through it without a flicker of hesitation. That is what chemistry buys you. That is the ruthless efficiency that wins doubles matches. So the result, when you actually understand it, makes perfect sense, but the result is not why this match mattered. The result is not why people are still talking about it. To understand that, you have to understand who Alexandra Eala is and the staggering momentum she carried into this tournament. Because this is not a feel-good wildcard story. This is not a lucky run by a player having one good week. Eala has been one of the most dangerous young players on grass all season long. Earlier in June, she captured the WTA 125 title in Birmingham. Then she backed it up with a breakthrough run all the way to her first ever WTA 500 semifinal at the Berlin Open, knocking off some of the biggest names in the sport along the way, including a genuine statement victory over Alina Svitolina. That is not a fluke. That is a pattern. By the time she rolled into Bad Homburg, she had built a remarkable 9-2 record on grass, establishing herself as one of the most threatening rising stars on the surface, and she was only 21 years old. And that run has carried her to a milestone that is genuinely historic. Eala is set to walk into Wimbledon as the number 29 seed. Now, I know a seeding number doesn't sound dramatic on its surface, but understand what it represents. It represents months of relentless climbing, hard-won victories, and a growing belief that she doesn't just compete with the elite, she belongs among them. For a player who only recently broke onto the biggest stage in tennis, earning a seed at the most prestigious tournament in the world is a declaration. She is no longer chasing the sport's top players. She is becoming one of them. But here is where it goes from impressive to historic. Eala is on the verge of becoming the first Filipino player ever to be seeded in the singles draw of a Grand Slam tournament ever. Think about the weight of that. For a country that has never had a tennis player reach this height on the sport's grandest stage, this is not just a personal achievement. This is national pride on a scale most athletes never get to carry. Every time she steps onto the grass at Wimbledon, she carries the hopes of millions of fans back home who have watched her rise with their hearts in their throats. And when she was asked what earning that seed actually meant to her, she didn't reach for a rehearsed line. She said, "To be a seed in a slam, and Wimbledon in particular, for me, it really touches close to home." Simple words, but they carry the entire emotional weight of a dream that belongs to far more than just one player. Now hold that thought, because this is where the story deepens. To truly grasp why this short-lived doubles partnership captured the imagination of tennis fans across the globe, you have to look across the court and remember exactly who Eala chose to stand beside. Venus Williams, a living legend, a former world number one in both singles and doubles, a five-time Wimbledon singles champion, the winner of 49 WTA singles titles, and the owner of 22 career doubles titles, including an astonishing 14 Grand Slam doubles crowns, which places her among the greatest doubles players the sport has ever seen. Long before Eala was even born, Venus was already lifting major trophies and fundamentally reshaping the landscape of women's tennis. She is not simply a former champion, she is a living, breathing piece of the sport's history whose influence reaches far beyond anything sitting in her trophy case. That is why Eala's reaction to this partnership felt so genuine, so completely without pretense. There were no generic, polite compliments. She said, "I am really, really excited. Venus is such a trailblazer and continues to do so much and has done so much for the sport. I like to say that women's tennis has been a trailblazer for women's sports, and she is a big part of why that is." Listen to those words. That is not how you talk about a doubles partner. That is how you talk about a lifelong hero. And that is the emotional core of this entire story. Eala grew up watching a version of women's tennis that Venus Williams helped build, a sport where opportunities widened, where barriers came crashing down, where a young player from a country with almost no tennis tradition could dare to believe she belonged on the biggest stages in the world. Now at 21, on the brink of making history herself, Eala got to stand shoulder to shoulder with one of the very women who made that dream possible in the first place. That is what made this partnership special. It was never really about winning matches. It was one generation reaching back and inspiring the next, the past, and the future of women's tennis standing on the same side of the net, if only for a fleeting, unforgettable moment. You did not need a dramatic press conference or a tearful farewell to feel the significance. It was obvious the instant they walked out together. And when you measure the full scope of Venus Williams' career, the moment becomes even more profound. Her accomplishments span entire generations. She had already built a legendary career and stacked up major titles before Eala had even taken her first breath. So for Eala, this was not about sharing a locker room or trading a few practice sessions with an icon. This was the chance to step onto the court and call one of the greatest players in the history of the game her partner. Imagine the swirl of emotion emotions in that. The thrill of competing beside a childhood inspiration, the pride of having earned that opportunity, and the pressure of trying to live up to the standard of a champion who shaped the modern game. No ranking points on earth can measure an experience like that, and maybe that is why this whole thing feels so bittersweet. Everyone knew going in that this partnership was never built to last. It was always a short-term collaboration, a special grass court reunion to sharpen up before Wimbledon. And still, fans couldn't help but daydream. What if the magic kept going? What if this duo caught fire? Instead, after just one tournament and only 80 minutes in the quarterfinals, it was over almost as fast as it began. But understand this, Eala walked away with something worth far more than another win. She shared the court with one of her greatest inspirations and created a memory that will stand among the defining moments of her young career. And there was no drama in the ending. No falling out, no disappointment, no off-court tension. The partnership concluded exactly the way it was always meant to, at the close of a single-week grass court campaign. They lost because they ran into a seasoned team that simply executed better when the biggest moments arrived. That is the brutal, beautiful reality of doubles tennis. What makes it sting just a little more is that fans got a real glimpse of what could have been. In the round of 16, Eala and Williams looked like they had been a team for years. They stormed out to a commanding 4-0 lead, their movement and communication clicking almost instantly before sealing a genuinely impressive 6-3, 6-4 victory, with Venus calmly serving out the match. For one unforgettable evening, the partnership delivered on every ounce of its promise. It gave everyone a reason to believe this unlikely pairing might go on a magical run. And then, less than 24 hours later, it was finished. That is precisely what makes sport so gripping and at times so heartbreaking. Just as you start to imagine the possibilities, reality slams the book shut. What I find genuinely moving is that even the players on the winning side understood the weight of the moment. Mihalikova and Nichols knew they weren't just facing another doubles team, they were facing one of the tournament's biggest stories. And after the win, there was no chest thumping, no celebration at their opponent's expense. There was only respect. Mihalikova admitted that facing a legend like Venus was something extraordinary, reflecting that playing against Venus or against Serena at Wimbledon is genuinely a once-in-a-lifetime experience that stays in your head whether you want it to or not, while acknowledging it was a tough match made tougher by difficult playing conditions. That reaction tells you everything about the stature of what unfolded. And when you pull back and look at the full picture, this stops being a story about a quarterfinal loss in Germany. It becomes a story about one generation of women's tennis meeting the next. On one side, Venus Williams, perhaps entering the final chapter of one of the most extraordinary careers the sport has ever known. On the other, Alexandra Eala, a 21-year-old whose career is only just beginning to reveal its ceiling. For one brief tournament, the past and the future shared the same patch of grass. And the timing only sharpens the meaning. Within days, Venus is expected to return to Wimbledon for another emotional chapter, reuniting with her sister Serena in doubles for the first time since 2016. Serena has been away from professional tennis for several years, and seeing the Williams sisters stand together again on the grass, where they built so much of their legend, is something fans never expected to witness again. Together, they have won 6 Wimbledon doubles titles and stand among the greatest doubles teams in the history of the sport. If it turns out to be their final appearance together, it will be yet another unforgettable chapter in what many consider the greatest sibling partnership tennis has ever seen. But that is exactly why this week with Eala mattered so much. Years from now, almost nobody will remember that the score was 6-3, 6-2. What they will remember is that for one special week, a rising star and a living legend shared the same side of the net. They will remember that Eala, the young player who grew up admiring Venus Williams, got to call one of her greatest inspirations a teammate before continuing her own march toward history. It felt like a passing of the torch, one generation handing belief to the next. Because sometimes the most meaningful moments in sport aren't measured in trophies or scorelines. They're measured in the memories they leave behind and the inspiration they pass on. This partnership ended sooner than anyone wanted, but it accomplished something greater than any win. It reminded us what makes this sport so special. Respect across generations, dreams turning real, and a young player getting to stand beside the champion who helped make those dreams possible in the first place. Dot, so now I want to hear from you. Do you think this partnership between Eala and Williams will be remembered as a once-in-a-lifetime moment that fans talk about for years? Or do you wish we could have seen them team up again somewhere down the road? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this story moved you, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the biggest stories from the world of tennis.